Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching the Political Vigilante. Special guest Kim Iversen is here from the Kim Iversen Show. Kim, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
How is your quarantining going?
Yeah, it kind of sucks. It really sucks. I have friends and I was asking, hey, you guys want to come over or something and hang out? And they're like, no, got to isolate, social distancing. And I understand for a lot of my friends, they are because they work in the healthcare field, some of them. And so they can't risk getting infected because then they would take that to other people that are more vulnerable and getting them infected and stuff. So, yeah, I mean, here we are. But I set up my place so I don't have to leave ever, even after the quarantine's over. I could just continue to be a social hermit.
Yeah, I went on a walk today because I just had to get outside, but I am just like making videos and stuff. So you and I have talked about this, and you put out a video about the weather component to COVID-19
Yeah.
that really I haven't heard many people discuss. And so why don't you walk us through that?
Okay. So I stumbled upon some research. It was a research paper done by 6 different medical researchers, professors, doctors. Okay. These doctors come from Maryland and Iran. And these are doctors. So some people, when they hear this, they kind of say conspiracy theory, or this is bullshit, but this is actual science. These guys are 6 reputable doctors and researchers working in this field. And they wanted to see if there was truly a weather component to the virus. Like many viruses that can live more predominantly in certain types of weather, they wanted to know, is there some truth to that? Donald Trump, of course, said it in the very beginning. He was saying, oh, in April, this is all going to go away. He was saying that, things are going to warm up and it's going to be fine. And the media kind of went crazy with that and said, oh my gosh, how irresponsible of him. He's crazy. This is the end of the world and it's not going to go away in April. That's kind of a bit of the story. So nobody's really covering this because a lot of the media outlets, they don't want to give any credence to the idea that the weather might actually have something to do with the tampering down of this virus as time goes on. So this paper was done by these doctors, and what they discovered was if you plot on the map, so if you want to put the map up, I know I sent it to you, but if you plot on the map all of the places in the world where there's been some really significant outbreaks. Now, of course, the virus is everywhere in the world because we have a global traveling world.
Right.
But if you look at this map here and you look at the black circles on the map, you can see, if you start all the way to the right, you've got Japan. So these are where the major outbreaks happen, where the numbers were increasing by the 1,000. These are thousands and thousands of outbreaks. So Japan, South Korea, you've got Wuhan, China, of course, where it started. Then you move over and you've got the northern part of Iran, which is what was really affected. Then you got northern Italy. And we also, of course, have the outbreak in Seattle. Now, of course, so you notice when you look at this map, just that all of the real major outbreaks are in a certain type of weather. This is a weather map. The weather map that these doctors and scientists used was from this website called climatereanalyzer.com. They don't have the maps from 2020. So they're using the map from 2019, pretty much year by year. Each month we notice the same type of weather for the most part. This year is 2020 is slightly cooler than 2019, but for the most part the same. You know what to expect in March, you know what to expect in February.
So just so our viewers know, this is a 2019 map. So it's not, it's
weather map.
Weather map. There's a 2019 weather map. So it's similar, but not like spot on accurate.
Right. It's not spot on for 2020 because 2020 is a little cooler, but this is an overall map for February of what the month of February looked like around the world on average in 2019. 2020 is probably going to end up being similar, but Climate Reanalyzer, that website hasn't put together that full data yet. So they used the 2019 maps, but you can go back in time and you can see all the map from 2017, 2018, 2016, and they all look pretty much the same.
So how would you then explain, like, New York has been having a fair amount of outbreaks, and they apparently, according to that map, aren't really in that weather thing. I mean, obviously New York...
Right, they're cooler.
They are cooler.
Yeah.
But New York...
Well, first of all, that was a February map, and we could also look at the January map, which in January really, that's when it started really breaking out in Wuhan quite a bit. And then February, it was still going strong, raging throughout South Korea and Japan. The thing about, of course, hubs around the world where there's large amounts of travel, we're going to see an outbreak of the virus.
It condensed
got a lot of people traveling.
And yeah.
Well, and it's just a lot of people in those regions travel. So, you're going to see people coming in and out of New York with the virus, and they're going to, they live in New York. They fly out of New York all around the world. They tend to be more globetrotters than people that are living in, let's say, St. Louis, Missouri, or, my hometown of Boise, Idaho, for example. Not a lot of international travelers that are living there. So you are going to see an uptick in cases in places where there's a lot of world travel. Mm-hmm. But the point, what they found is that if you look at all of the cases around the world, like, of course, Brazil has some, of course, there's some down in Australia, you've got some in, even if you go up near Asia, if you go up near China in Asia, you go to Vietnam, you go to Thailand, even down Singapore, Taiwan, all of those are in the red zone, right? Mm-hmm. Well, those nations just did not end up seeing huge numbers of virus. Now, I think what people need to understand is what huge means. A lot of people say, oh, but Australia has like 200 something cases or 300. Australia has a handful, like a few hundred cases. I think they're in the 300s right now. So people are saying, so that's not true. That map isn't true because look at Australia. They're in the red, but they have 300 cases. 300 cases is nothing in comparison to thousands and thousands of cases that have broken out in the northern part of Italy. They're approaching 30,000 cases. Wuhan had 80,000 cases. South Korea, closer to 10,000 cases. So Iran, they've got close to, I think they're getting to 20,000 cases. So though that's high numbers, 300 cases is not a lot of numbers. Vietnam has 60 cases. They've been able to trace all of their 60 cases to travel. They're all travel related, or close contact from somebody who came back from a trip. But in Italy, a lot of the people infected in that 30,000 people, they were not all traveling. They weren't traveling. These were people that they got infected by some travelers that came into Italy, and then it just went like wildfire throughout the population, throughout the community. They're not seeing that happening in areas where the climate is different. What they found with those, the areas on that strip, that kind of yellow-green line, that is about, it's a little under 50 degrees on average. So you're looking at climates that are in the 40s and 50s. And you're looking at a certain humidity, or lack of humidity at the time during those kind of dry spells. So, or I don't know if it's a lack of humidity, but it's a certain humidity profile, and it's definitely a certain temperature profile. And that's what they're discovering, is that when they plot where the virus is really hitting the hardest, it's hitting the hardest in zones that happen to have that particular type of weather. It doesn't mean it cannot exist outside of that zone. It just means it's not going to exponentially explode outside of that zone. It's not likely to grow into the thousands, and one person can infect 100 people just by going to a grocery store or something.
Right, and that's a valid point to bring up, because they've even said, like the regular flu, this is a type of flu virus that those can't really exist or live or be as contagious under, over, I believe it's 26 degrees centigrade, right? So
yeah,
that's why. But it's a legitimate thing to talk about, because with the Spanish flu that happened over 100 years ago, it died out in the summer and everybody thought it was over, and then it can come back as the temperature changes, right? As the northern hemisphere, that whole yellow zone that we were just looking at, goes into the summer, it could come down, but then it could come back up, and it's good to point out the exponential nature of what you're. So I was just watching. Los Angeles County now has 94 cases. It's had 41 new cases in the last 3 hours or 4 hours or something like that.
But I would say if these researchers are correct, Los Angeles County is not going to see an exponential outbreak. Now, LA is also an international travel hub. So you've had a lot of people before they decided to lock down LAX, for example, before they just, I don't even know if they're doing that, but before they decided to kind of limit everybody coming in, you got a lot of people that were coming in with the virus, and they're here now and they're being tested and they're testing positive. And it turns out it's because they were skiing in the Alps, right in the northern part of Italy, a lot of cases like that, or they were visiting family in China, or they were in these kind of hotspot zones. We've got a lot of we have a lot of Iranians living in the United States, living here in Los Angeles area. Maybe they had gone to Iran and seen family and come back. And certainly a lot of Asians. I will say that a lot of people did travel to Asia for the Lunar New Year.
Right.
And came back, when the Lunar New Year is pretty much shut down over there. But by then they might have already been exposed. They come here and they're exposing their close contacts. I don't anticipate, if this research is correct, I think the explosion in California will be in San Francisco Bay Area. They're in that weather profile.
Yeah, let's look at that. So this is San Francisco absolutely is in that weather profile. Excuse me, and they've just had to do. They've just basically told everybody to quarantine 7 million people. That just came down today. The president just said the new guidelines are going to be 10 or less people only. 10 over 10 or more people. They're like, don't gather.
Right.
LA County is still at 50 or more people, but I bet you that's going to change. I mean, I think we're going to look at, and one of the things we were discussing this last night with Ron Placone, is that if these measures actually do work, it could maybe stem this. But I want to go back to your report and the weather patterns. So from what that report said, in accordance with this weather pattern, it looks like as the country warms up, it's not going to be that bad in the warmer parts of the country. But you're thinking San Francisco, which usually stays, even in the summer, can stay in the 50s. You're saying that it could be worse there, and in Seattle, which is sort of always in that climate.
Yeah, exactly. So what we know is right now we are in the infancy here in the United States for the virus. So as the virus starts to really take off, because the virus has followed the same pattern everywhere. So it starts off a few cases relevant to the population. So you always have to take that into consideration. We're a country of 350 million people. We are bound to see more cases than South Korea, which is a country of 50 million. They have, 8 to 10,000 cases. I think they're stabling out at around 8 something cases, because they're having, South Korea is now on the mend. They're having very few new cases a day. China has very few cases a day. They're talking handful.
Right.
So they're they're getting over it. But looking at South Korea, their population is 50 million. They got, let's say, 10,000 people. So you multiply that by 5, right? And that's probably what we're looking at. Is that by 5 to get 350 million? My math.
Oh.
See, guys. No, sorry. It would be, so we might see, so it's, I don't know what's going on with me here. Yeah, I mean, you can multiply, we might see here in the United States probably 50 to 75,000 cases is probably where we'll end out, I would think. That sounds like a lot to people. Italy only had, they're saying, people say, oh my gosh, but Italy only had, 30,000 cases before it starts to level out. Maybe Italy will have 40,000. If we end up with 50 to 75,000 cases, people will say, oh my gosh, that's a lot. But it's actually it's pretty on par with population. And because it'll likely hit some densely populated areas like Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. It'll work its way down into Denver. When you look at that map, it goes down to Kansas City, St. Louis, and
all sort of the middle of the country here.
Unless, the country's going to start warming up. So we are in the very beginning of the cycle, and the country will start warming, and that weather pattern will move up north a bit. That could be pretty disastrous for New York City and Washington, D.C. So if if the virus spikes right around the time the weather pattern moves to the north, then yeah, I mean, that could be really big with, if New York goes into crisis with the virus, that could be, and especially the way New Yorkers live, that's more problematic. You've got, like, here in LA, we all live fairly, we're not in such close quarters comparatively to like New Yorkers or Europeans. Los Angeles, we all have our own cars. We're isolated in our cars. We're driving around by ourselves all the time. We live pretty isolated lives naturally in Los Angeles. So, and in America in general, Americans go through fast food drive-throughs. They don't, Americans aren't hanging out together. Yeah, of course, there are happy hours in the United States, but nothing like in Italy, nothing like the way Italians live, 100% different than the way we live over here in the United States. So I think we will see, areas of the country where there is a pretty serious outbreak. And I think that the measures that they want to take, I think, is pretty smart for those areas. Of course, we don't know, if these researchers are correct, but if they end up correct, then when this virus comes back next year, I would hope that they would have a better plan in place than to just like shut everything down.
Yeah, we can't shut everything down for a month every year.
This.
Like this is there's no way. So there needs to be a million more things in place.
Also, just to look back at that map, I want to point something else out to kind of prove this point that it's probably weather that is helping. Is that when I know you can't really zoom in much on those areas, but South Korea, so starting over in South Korea, for example, when you look at the weather pattern, you'll notice that so I know there's North Korea, but we're not going to talk about North Korea. North Korea is kind of in that green, right? But northern part of South Korea, where Seoul is in the northern part of South Korea. Seoul did not get hit that hard. And that is the most populated area of South Korea. That's not the area where the outbreak happened, where they're seeing that concentration. Of course, there are cases in Seoul. There are, but the majority of the mass outbreak happened in the southern part of South Korea, where that weather pattern is really hitting. Same thing when you move into China. China is a big country. It hit in Wuhan. Wuhan happens to be one of the main areas right in that weather pattern. The rest of the country that is not in that weather pattern didn't get hit, even though they're extremely populated. Iran, same thing. When you look at Iran, most of Iran is in the red zone. Guess where the outbreak happened? In the northern part of Iran. When you look at Italy as well. Italy is a nation that has a variety of different weather, from north to south. You go from the mountains in the Alps all the way down to the south when you get down to the Mediterranean Sea, at the very bottom of the boot. And the weather is very different all throughout Italy. But what do we see? We see that the outbreak happened not in Rome as much, where there's a huge tourist population and massive population for Italy, but instead in Milan in the very north, where that weather pattern is. So same thing with the United States. It hit Seattle, and why not Los Angeles, where there's way more international travel coming in and out.
Yeah, why not Las Vegas? Why not? I mean, Las Vegas has found cases, and the casinos have started to shut down and stuff today. But you would think Vegas or LA, LA is like such an international city. Seattle is kind of, but LA is such an international city. Yeah. Both Seattle, San Francisco, and Los Angeles have big Asian, specifically Chinese communities, obviously. Right. But you would think then LA has a bigger Chinese community than Seattle does. So you would think if that was just from that traveling alone, LA would have been hit harder and faster.
Right. But LA is not in that zone of the weather pattern. So that kind of goes to support the researchers even more with their thinking that it's more weather related, is that it's not just that those particular countries were hit. You have to look at where in those countries they were hit. And the fact that they were hit in areas that are not necessarily their most populated regions, but instead the regions that are in that weather pattern, I think it really does support the claim that this virus seems to thrive in a particular weather pattern. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist in other weather. It does, it exists, but where does it just go crazy and exponentially start infecting a lot of people? But even then, I think everybody needs to kind of keep some perspective here. Italy is a country of 70 million people, and that's just their inhabitants. That is not including the millions of people who travel to Italy every single year. So to get 30,000 people infected out of 70 million is still a very low percentage of the population.
Right.
Under 1%. So I think people need to kind of keep.
Well, yeah, you've got 1% is infected, and 1% of the infected are dying, and the majority of them are
older.
Now there have been some cases of younger people, dying, and so it's not like no one can die from this, but it's obviously people.
It's obviously a group. And another thing to know about Italy is that Italy is the oldest population in the entire EU. So they, unfortunately for them, were like a sitting duck for this virus. I mean, the northern part of Italy is there right in that weather pattern, so they got stuck in the weather pattern, and they happen to have the oldest population in the EU. They're a population that smokes a lot, and smokers are also really hard hit with the virus as well. So Italy was kind of a sitting duck. And you have to remember that the lifestyle of Italians, they're using mass transit. They get together all the time for aperitivo in the afternoons after work.
They hug and kiss and all that.
Right. Totally, completely. And they're in small confined quarters. Everything's small in Italy. Their grocery stores are small. Their restaurants are small. They're getting together. They're constantly together. It's an extremely social culture. I was living in Italy just a year and a half ago, and I'm in love with Italy. I'm in love with the culture, but because it is so social and people are always together, and they're also very multi-generational. They don't really live together as much like in Asian families, which is another reason why Wuhan, China would have been hit really hard, and why there would be a lot of deaths in places like Korea, South Korea and China. Asian families live together. But in Italy, they don't really live necessarily in multi-generational households. But what they do is they get together all the time to eat with grandma and with mom. And, they're always together, like constantly having dinner and getting together for lunch and dinner and spending a lot of time together. So the exposure rate for them, they're just way more social. And Asians that maybe don't have as much of a social culture like Italians do, as far as like, let's get together and drink a spritz. Asians just live a lot. They live together, and and when you look at Asia is extremely densely populated. People are walking around together. It's like sardines in Asia. So, it's going to be interesting. Spain has kind of got a similar culture to Italy, and they're also also Spain is right now being hit really hard with the virus. So when you look at places like that, Spain right now, according to that map, Spain is not so much in the weather pattern. It's still in the yellow, but not really the yellow-green in that map.
Right.
But that is why we need to take into consideration that 2020 is slightly cooler than 2019, because when you look at, I was able to look on like windy.com for kind of 10-day weather forecasts for the last 10 days. I couldn't get like a map like this, a full 1 month kind of climate analyzed map. But I could get like a 10-day look. And when you look at that, you see that Spain, the northern part of Spain, is in that yellow-green still.
Right.
And they're right now being hit with the virus. And that, we're also seeing in the United States, by the way, Seattle has a big population hit. Obviously, Seattle's the hardest hit at the moment. I believe it's still the hardest hit. New York is obviously getting a lot, but New York's travel zone, so you kind of have to take that in consideration. But interestingly, Denver, Colorado, is another area that right now is just being hit really hard, harder than other areas, harder than Los Angeles. So when you look at the fact that Denver is being hit harder than places like Los Angeles, then you look at the weather pattern on the map, it makes sense. Denver's right in that zone. I worry about my family, for example. My family's in Idaho. They're right there in that weather pattern. They're in southern Idaho. So they're right there in that weather pattern. I have to worry about my dad. And, I have to worry that he doesn't get infected because he would be very vulnerable.
Right.
But, and I think that's the point of this, right? The point is these researchers, and the reason why they wanted to even bring this up, the point of it is that you want to prepare certain communities. It's going to be really challenging to prepare all of our communities for this. But if we can target where we know it's probably going to hit harder, then it's a lot easier to set up to deploy, let's say, the National Guard to set up
Right.
kind of makeshift hospitals in those regions and make sure that they have a supply of ventilators on hand and what they might need if the elderly in those communities end up getting sick.
Yeah, we the military is ready to go to deploy, field hospitals. We have all these arenas that aren't being used, all around the country. So like we should be getting that set up now. You bring up a good point about how everyone's got to kind of work together on this because, like the elderly or somebody that's in one of these high risk groups, they shouldn't be going out to the store. We should be, if you have neighbors that are elderly or something, see if you can go to the store for them and help them out. Everyone's got to kind of work together on this. I saw, Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York actually was speaking maybe a half hour before we started. And that's the thing he was talking about. He's like, when these other disasters have hit, Sandy or whatever, he goes, I saw the people in these New York communities start helping each other out immediately. We need to do that. Like people hoarding toilet paper, like there's a family, there's somebody with disabilities or somebody that could use that. We don't need that.
That is, to me, that's the sickest part of this whole thing is it's not that we're going to get sick with this virus. We have gotten sick with this panic mentality where it's just people hoarding things and not at all thinking about their neighbors. And you know what? That's another thing that is a Western mentality. Italy is not doing that. My friends in Italy that are reporting back to me, they say their grocery stores are not emptied out.
Right.
They're not having this problem. And Italy, of all the places, I mean, they have got the virus really, it's heavily hitting them. They're all in lockdown, and yet they're still not looting their grocery stores and everybody getting together and sanitizer. And I know from living in Italy that the mentality of the people is you would be shamed if you did something like that. They would not tolerate that.
In the Asian cultures, you'd be shamed for that.
Right.
Like America's just this selfish, I got to get mine is just, I'm so tired of it. America needs to pull its head out of its greedy, selfish, capitalist ass.
The UK is doing that as well. It's the UK and America. It's like this kind of, the UK is going nuts too, and they're hoarding. And people are looting, they're taking as much as they can. And we're not seeing that mentality in Italy where people are being very respectful and very much thinking of their neighbors, very much thinking of the community, very much getting together on this. And that is one thing that I think is, they're not panicking. The thing about Italy, their panic is, of course, and they have reason to because they are so multi-generational in how they hang out. The Italians love hanging out with their parents and grandparents. A lot of, in America, we're kind of like, oh, I can't, I want to hang out with my friends. I don't want to hang out with my old grandparents and parents. In Italy, it's not like that. They will tell their friends, no, not today. I'm going to go see my nonna, So it's that they have to be a bit more panicked. If a younger person in Italy gets sick, it means the whole family, including nonna, gets sick. And that is a real concern for Italians. Whereas like us Americans, I mean, I don't have to go near my family, I don't have to go and infect anybody older in my life. I go visit my mom or my grandma or my dad on occasion to eat dinner, so I can go a month without that. But in Italian culture, that's a lot harder to do. That would be devastating to those handsome, very handsome, but very much mama boy Italian men.
Well, Kim, thank you so much for sharing this research that you came across with us. Everybody, please check out Kim's show on YouTube, The Kim Iversen Show. It's fantastic. And thank you for being on, Kim. And where else can people follow you online?
Yeah, just, YouTube, just Kim Iversen on YouTube. Follow, subscribe, whatever, watch the show, do it. But, the point of all of this, and thank you for having me on, but, the point of all of this is just, obviously right now it's a new virus. And so everybody's freaking out because it's kind of the unknown, and people are always afraid of the unknown. And I totally understand that. But as the science starts coming out, I think we need to start calming down a little bit and saying, okay, we are going to get through this. It's not going to be end of the world. It doesn't mean, millions of people are not going to die. And my only other concern about this is, I understand the need for all the lockdowns. I understand people are doing that. I just think that it's going to create a bit of science denying when, ironically, when the researchers do come out and say, okay, we have analyzed and it does follow a weather pattern, and this is like the way it is. And that's why Los Angeles, for example, didn't get that many cases, is because it wasn't really the right weather to thrive in Los Angeles. You know, the virus just didn't really move around much. People are going to say, no, the reason LA didn't get it is because we all went on lockdown. And it's going to create this, that's what we have to do mentality. Like, oh, we got to just go on lockdown because that is what it was that saved us. And in the meantime, you know, a lot of areas in Asia are not on lockdown. I know people want to be a little bit mentally, you know, when I say, okay, well, Vietnam only has like 60 cases, people say, oh, that's because they're not testing. That is not true. Vietnam is a nation filled with very intelligent people. They created their own test kit as a nation so that they could have rapid, speedy testing. They share a border with China. They were very alerted. They were very aware, and they were very prepared. It just turned out they didn't have any cases. So Vietnam sat there and said, oh, well, you know what? We were ready. We had the test kits. We had the hospitals ready. You know, we were ready, and it just didn't really hit. So they didn't have to go on lockdown. They didn't, you know, they're living life totally as normal. I hear Mexico is as well. I think they're going to be interesting to kind of pay attention to see what happens in Mexico. Right. But, you know, I just wonder if people are going to end up ultimately kind of science denying a little bit in the future and saying, no, it was the lockdown that saved us, or it was the rapid testing that saved us. And it's like, Vietnam has rapid testing. They just haven't needed to use it. I don't think you could say the rapid testing is saving them. Right.
These are great points, Kim. Thanks for sharing all this with us. And,
yeah, thank you.
We'll keep this updated, and check out Kim's show and like, share, and subscribe to The Political Vigilante. And of course, support us at patreon.com/GrahamElwood or rockfin.com/GrahamElwood. And I'll be making as many videos as I can. As of right now, our tour dates are still happening, but that could change at a moment's notice. Our next one is in April in Seattle and Portland. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Right in the weather zone, Graham. Boo! Don't do it.
Go. So
don't do it.
My guess is they just made it nationwide. 10 people or less can get together. So I don't know. I don't know what the tour dates are going to mean for everybody. I'm going to try to do more like live streaming shows and stand up and all that other stuff. So we'll have you back on the show, Kim. Thank you so much, everybody. You're all making Gotham great again.